Let's talk about 4 ways of relating and talking, conversing with people. All right. I have my iPad here. I'm going to draw some stick figures. And this is something that was shared with me by a mentor a long time ago. And it stayed with me for a long time. And just want to pass it forward. So here we go. In order to talk about 4 types of talking with people, 4 ways of talking with people, let's draw 4 people. But let's get started with a little kid and another kid. And this right here, it's supposed to be an arrow. There we go. First way of talking is just child to child. You know, they speak to each other on their own level. They're being playful. They're learning how to navigate the world. But on some sense, they kind of relate to each other as equals. They know they're both kids. But that's about the extent of it. But then a child meets another adult. So let's do this one's number 2. And so a child then has to navigate, how do I talk to another adult? How do I speak to them? Not only do I physically look up to them, maybe I actually do in the sense of life as well. And so you can have children talking up to their adult friend or whatever with some level of reverence. And in some sense, this can also happen with mentors, can happen with coaches, can happen with anyone that we look up to, you know. Although I've drawn a little child stick figure here, this can also happen when you enter adulthood, you know. Some people, when they encounter someone they look up to, they can become starstruck and relate to them like, oh wow, you're an adult, like you've actually achieved things, you've actually gotten to you've gotten to where I want to be. And so there's a way in which probably celebrities deal with this all the time. People approach them in some sense, maybe, as if those are children. Like, oh, wow, they're just fawning over the adult looking up to them, you know. But let's draw another adult because this is going to get a little bit more complicated. Let's draw that like a little longer. The third way of conversing is this. Maybe you see this comment. Number 3 is adult to child. So first we have child to child, then we've got child to adult, and now we've got adult to child. And this is the type of conversation when an adult is speaking down to a kid because they're obviously shorter, but then also probably imparting some level of wisdom. You know, the adult knows more about life and how to navigate it, knows what's dangerous and what's not, and is trying to talk to the child. And this can be done either in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. This can be very condescending, you know, and one of the things that we need to be careful of is never talking to an adult as if they're a child. This is that whole condescending mansplaining type thing when people over explain things that weren't asked about. And so there's sometimes a tendency in some of us to talk down to people, and that's something that we need to curb, especially when we are actually relating to adults and we're treating them like children. That's not always helpful. It's probably better to treat people with the integrity and the reality of what they are, you know. But the fourth type of relating, which goes like this, number 4, is the adult to adult. And this is pretty important because it's about treating one another as equals. It's about looking at the even playing field. Although we've got very different fields and we've got very different backgrounds, very different life experiences, neither side is talking down to the other person, nor is the other side overly looking up to the other person. Now, all of these types of conversing and talking with people, you can kind of see these dynamics happen when a high schooler or a college student comes home and there's a lot of conflict. It's because the lines are starting to blur between whether or not the adult should talk to this young adult as if they're a child or as an adult. And so that jump between the third and the fourth way of talking here, that's something that's pretty common in the later years, later teenage years, and even college years. This can even happen in later adulthood when parents don't know how to treat their children like adults. And that can be very full of conflict. This can also happen in workplaces. This can happen in faith communities, especially when you have someone who's up in front who's being modeled as if they have all the answers. It's very easy for certain faith communities for the people in charge to start relating to others in the third type of relating here, you know. But that whole fourth way, that's probably the goal. Or actually, maybe we could say the goal is to relate to each person appropriately. If you're talking to a child, you treat them like a child, not in an insulting way. That's not what I mean. But be mindful that some topics they don't need to know about yet. And we need to be careful of overly looking up to people, which is probably celebrity culture. And you can certainly see this in politics. There are a lot of people who look up and have a type 2 way of conversing with people who are political figures, people in power, maybe people that don't deserve to really have the admiration of others. And so it's interesting because sometimes there can be people who are adults who expect people to look up to them and fawn at them. And that shows an insecurity. Now, all this just goes to say, I think that one of the reasons we have conflict in relationships is we unconsciously and inadvertently are confusing these lines. And we need to pay attention and make sure that we're relating to people on the level that is appropriate for them and appropriate for us. So, this is just 4 ways of talking that was shared with me by a mentor. And I don't know, I hope it helps you. So, cheers.